Turn the floor over to Louis from Comcast Ventures to take a look at global M&A. Okay, good morning. We're going to get started. I think we're running a little out of time here. I'm Louis Toth. I'm with Comcast Ventures. I spend a lot of my time looking at networking technologies, and that has obviously led me to Israel, and I've spent a fair amount of time the past few years investing in Israel and working with a lot of Israeli startups, and it's been a great experience thus far. So we've got an interesting panel today. On my left, my good friend Nagraj from Qualcomm. Nagraj runs the ventures group there, and we've had an opportunity to work with each other numerous times over the past few years. And additionally, Nagraj does some work around Qualcomm research, which is related to the CTO organization. His left is Chad Cornell from Medtronic. Chad is responsible for corporate development, which I understand includes venture investment activities. And then to his left is Issam, Dairanieh, I think I got that right, with VP Ventures. And Issam's responsible for looking at investment activities related to alternative energies and more recently technology-related upstream and downstream activities related to DV. So let's get things kicked off. We'll talk about deal making first, and we'll talk a little bit about investing and M&A, and then we'll circle back to the Israeli element of this. So I'd like to hear from each of you, since you both have a view, or you all have a view into venture activities as well as M&A. If you could talk about how your organizations think about innovation with respect to venturing, M&A, internal development, maybe partnering. And just maybe at a high level discuss where each of those tools is appropriate versus the other. Nagraj, you want to start us off?
Sure, I'll start off. So, as Louis mentioned in the introduction, I run the Ventures Group, but I also report to the CTO, so I take care of the business development partnership activities for our research organization. So that sort of is a way of thinking of how Qualcomm thinks about both venturing and partnering innovation, which is in the earlier stages, we try to use those two tools both for helping the ecosystem. So the venture investments is really around helping the mobile ecosystem for Qualcomm, and the research organization is looking at activities that are much further away from what a business unit would intake. So it would be something where it's 3 to 7 years out. And in those cases, and the venture side, we look to either invest or partner. When companies are either obviously mature with revenue or are fitting a specific product hole for us, we do look at M&A, and M&A is a separate group for us. So we distinguish between corporate development M&A and then venturing investments and partnering. So I'm more on the venture investments and partnering side, and then we have a separate group that looks into M&A. And I think one of the questions was, how does companies or individuals approach Qualcomm? Typically, our organization is one of the more outside-facing groups in Qualcomm, so we do get a lot of inbound, and that's perfectly fine. We can help filter whether this is a venture investment, it's more of a partner, or really belongs in the corporate organization. So we can absolutely do that triaging for you. Or you can also, if you have contacts within Qualcomm, it's a big company, you can also go other routes.
At Medtronic, as Louis said, the corporate development includes the venture investing function and the M&A function. So I and my group do both. we have always been a very active venture investor. Medtronic, for those of you who don't know, is in the medical device field. So generally implants that go into the body to cure or palliate a chronic condition. And venture investing has been incredibly important for us and our competitors in the field. Healthcare is renowned for its long timelines and clinical risk. And so at a very simple, sort of superficial level, venture investing lets companies like Medtronic get an early look at a technology, help foster it, build value, but it's risky stuff. And our clinical and R&D budgets are stretched, and we're going to focus more on things where we feel the risk is taken out and areas where we can add more value, like conducting clinical trials and working with government agencies. Venture companies aren't set up to do that. So this ecosystem in healthcare has evolved, and Israel plays a very prominent role there. Medtronic and a number of our competitors spend a lot of time working with Israeli entrepreneurs in healthcare. And then M&A is sort of the logical extension, at least for us, of the venture investments. Hopefully they work out, and because you've been exposed to this technology, you buy it. And you know, maybe we can talk about this later. It's always a challenge for entrepreneurs. Do I take money early from a strategic investor? Will that be a deterrent to others? And it depends is the answer. So the two for us, M&A and venture investing, really tie together. And I'll conclude by saying we look at both of them in the context of our internal R&D. And this is one thing that at Medtronic and other competitors, sometimes investors say, look, you're buying and investing so much externally, why are you still spending so much internally on R&D? And that's one of the things we're increasingly grappling with. If you're going to go buy and invest in a lot of things, our venture portfolio is $600 million. $200 million of it is in China, but $400 is global, excluding China. That's a lot of money. And so increasingly we're challenging ourselves to say, if we're going to invest in a certain area, then we should not do as much internal R&D there. And that's a change for us, because traditionally we've done both.
Does your venturing activity, though, focus more on the core of the business, or is it more on new areas you're trying to get into, or peripheral areas?
It's both. It's both. And so the way we do things, if a venture investment is in a particular area we're in, a business unit usually comes and says, hey, let's go. I saw this technology, let's invest in these guys. And that's usually pretty easy strategically to do the assessment. We also, in my group, leads this effort, look at what we call white spaces. So for Medtronic, that's in areas you guys are in, informatics, data, wireless, and we spend time trying to figure out where our markets will go, and then where are technologies that someday we may be interested in. Issam.
So probably I should start with the genesis of the team. So this is about 7 years ago. Started looking at what is happening in the innovation landscape globally, and basically consider a few facts as we look at, for example, intellectual property that is generated. And what you will see, two things that are shifting. One is in terms of where this IP is generated. So while it used to be mostly done in the US and Western Europe, basically that has shifted, and now it is really more global in nature. And so that is one. The second aspect is really in terms of geographies and the role that Asia is playing in creating additional intellectual property. The third aspect is really what's happening to the corporate structure within the US. And you see that a huge number of the labs that existed and housed thousands of PhDs are no longer there. And if you look again at the patents filed, you will see that, and if you break it down by the size of the corporation, large versus small and medium, you see that the fraction that of the patents occupied by basically large corporation has decreased over the years. So the recognition then that things are changing globally as well as structurally basically allows us to think about what should we be doing to enrich the innovation landscape within BP. Before BP Ventures existed, we were very good at doing things in both sides, both extremes of the development cycle. So if there are things that are very close to market, the businesses would have joint development agreements or M&A or whatever it takes to acquire or access that technology. So anything that is 0 to 2 years probably that was handled by the businesses. Anything that is 10 years plus was handled by corporate function, the group technology, that has established very strong working programs with selected universities around the globe. So there is something that's called the Great University Programs that span the US, UK, China, Russia, and so on. The space that is in between, so if you have a technology that is in between 2 to 10 years, this was not really covered very well. And we thought that that's really where the venture team can play. Is look at, again, thinking strategically, what are the company's needs, and basically look at emerging technologies that can play a role in what we do in the time between, let's say, 2 to 3 years up to 7, 8, maybe 10 years maximum. The purpose of the venture team is really twofold. One is to support existing businesses. So the businesses have identified critical needs that we need to address in the future. So that's one aspect that we help with. And the second aspect is extension. So what about creating business opportunities? And again, we are the eyes and ears of the organization in looking at the new, basically, business opportunities. The final piece I want to mention is in terms of M&A. That's not something that we do within our team. There is a separate function within BP that handles the M&A, and the way that this thing is really divided between the two parts is anything less than 50 million we do, greater than 50 million that goes to M&A.
Great, that's a terrific answer. I don't know, Chad or Nagraj, if you wanted to comment on that time filter or time to market filter that Issam talked about in terms of how he looks at the world.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little bit different for us, but M&A is fairly, I would say, has been optimistic in terms of looking at what we need in a particular point in time. We bought billion-dollar companies, and then we bought a number of sort of product pillars. On the investment side, it's consistently been longer-range companies that we are not going to acquire. So we do not do invest to acquire. Typically, our investment philosophy is to help the ecosystem, help the companies around us, either use Qualcomm technologies or use Qualcomm ecosystem. So right now we have over 100 active companies worldwide. We operate in 7 different geographies. Israel is actually one of our more active areas, both actually in the recent past, both from an investment and from acquisition perspective. So I've spent a fair bit of time in Israel from both points. But yeah, it's more by nature. We look at investment activities as actually longer range, a little bit more of the eyes and sensors that was mentioned, and then M&A sort of comes and goes depending on what the business owners may need, particularly at any given point in time.
Great. So I'm sure the audience is full of budding entrepreneurs who are interested in talking to you guys at some point during the course of the day. So why don't you talk to us about maybe 1 or 2 trends that you guys see in your spaces and what that means in terms of your areas of interest on the venture investing side.
Sure, I think you were asked for a board prediction 3 to 5 years out. I think I just say I can't do a board prediction 3 to 5, but I will do one for 10 years. That's probably more of a time frame where I can do a board prediction. In our industry, which is the industry for mobile and data, one of the key things that is happening is, as all of you are here, I see less and less of the laptops, more and more of the mobile devices that people are taking out. It's easier to do that, less obtrusive in your conference. You don't want to hear what we're speaking about. Easier to put on a mobile device, which means you're using mobile data. And one of the key trends that we see accelerating in the predictions we have is that mobile data really is going to double every year. If you look at that, and you project 10 years, we get to 1,000 times capacity needs. So it's 1000x at the terminal point. Really, from now on, from 10 years, the mobile data networks have to handle 10x or 1000x the capacity of today's mobile data. That is a staggering number. And what that entails from an entrepreneur perspective, up and down the chain, is that there has to be many different elements either introduced or changed in the way networking happens on the mobile side to handle that demand. And there is no, I cannot see any way that this trend is going to slow down. So from our perspective, in fact, as it relates to Israel, we've done one investment, which is a company called Singular that has helped with the backhaul for the mobile data. We actually did the acquisition, companies on Design Art recently, in the same space also. Again, addressing the key components of how to handle this surge of mobile data that's coming. So I think those, from our perspective, are very key trends. And I think it sort of applies to a lot of the innovation that's happening in Israel also.
I'll give you two trends that are more macro, and I'm not sure how they play out for our business, but I feel pretty certain about them. One, healthcare, and our CEO says this all the time, it's right. Healthcare is a unique technology field where there's been incredible advances, but costs have not come down. In most other tech areas, maybe there's some exceptions, but generally, it seems that costs go down. Technology advances, but cost goes down, in large part because it's consumer. You got consumers buying this stuff, and they're not going to, you need to think about the cost. Healthcare's been different, at least in Europe and the US and the developed geographies. So I think that's one big change, is costs are coming down, and companies in the healthcare sector are going to figure out how to compete there. And that could be with product costs, that could be how you sell. Do you need sales guys and operating rooms, or do you sell to different people? I don't know. That could manifest itself in a bunch of different ways, but that's one trend. The second, I'd say, and this fits, is consumers, it fits with the first point and prior points, consumers are going to pay for more of their health care. There will be more transparency. And this is a big issue in the US right now, but globally, I think this will be one change that is coming. And so again, that will impact costs, but it will also affect how people consume healthcare. And everyone has a smartphone, and somehow the two are going to link up. So I completely agree. We at Medtronic completely agree that the marriage of informatics and data with healthcare is coming. People have been talking about it for 20 years, and it's taken a long time. But I think that what could sort of be the needle that breaks the camel's back is the fact that consumers are going to find out how much their health care is costing them, and they're going to have more skin in the game, and that will change how health care is delivered.
So I think in the energy and venture investment sector, the two trends are the following. The first one, there is a shift towards technologies that are less capital intensive. So what people have found over the past 6, 7, 8 years actually, that a company, a startup does not, with 20, 50 million does not really get into the market. You really have to put another zero at least to get into the market. And that's not something that venture capitalists are really prepared to do or used to do. So there is a shift towards less capital intensive, and what that means is there is more work and more opportunities in something like energy efficiency, which some of that can be software, some of that can be hardware. And if you look at the number of deals that were done in 2011 in the clean tech space, 20% roughly comes from really energy efficiency plays. So again, really working towards IT and energy, convergence of IT and energy is probably an area that's going to just gain more momentum in the future. So that's the first trend. The second trend is about the role that corporates can play. And again, it's because of the infrastructure and because of the capital intensity and access to markets, more and more people are recognizing that companies like ours basically will have probably a lot to help when it comes to further developing technologies in the energy sector.
Okay, great. So in the remaining time that we have, why don't we talk a little bit about Israel specifically and some of the transactions that you guys may have done, or at least cross-border transactions that you may have been involved with. Some advice for the folks in the audience: what worked, what didn't work. Feel free to use examples to the extent that you are able to. I'll leave it relatively open to talk about your experiences in deal making in Israel and cross-border development.
So as we said, I think we've been fairly active in Israel, both on the investment side and the M&A side. I will not touch upon the M&A side as much because that's not my function. Having said that, we just completed 2 transactions in the last 6 months on the M&A side. On the investment side, we have over 6 investments, and we've been investing in Israel for the last 5 years. Fairly active, which means I've been there many times. And this is one of those things where one of our investments is a company called Waze, and Waze is one of the best crowdsourced mapping and traffic apps. And over the last 5 years, this is the personal story I have, which is I've been going and I make bets with myself as to how much time it takes to get through security, how many times will I be stopped. And typically it's anything from 2 to 3 times stopped before you get the security gate, and then the security gate is a long way to get in. So this time around, 6 months back when I went, they asked me, what do I do? And I said, I make investments. And she said, well, what's the investment that you have? I said, wait. As soon as she heard that, she smiled, gave me a stamp, said, off you go. So I think I just need to make more of those investments. It's completely worth the money, so I think that worked out great. But that's one example of a company that we also did, in addition to the company I mentioned, Siklu. We've done, as I said, both from a hardware and software perspective. We find the talent in Israel to be really good at both layers. Because I think there was more of a heritage of infrastructure and hardware that is now transitioning. As a result of one of the trends that was mentioned, which is VCs actually, even in our sector, do not want to fund too many capital-intensive industries. So as a result, some of the talent in Israel has shifted towards more capital-efficient businesses, which means more software, more digital, more application-oriented. But we sort of see Israel as a fundamental tenet of the 3 geographies in our portfolio that will lead to core technology innovation, which is the US, Europe, and Israel. So those 3 we see as still being core in terms of leading to fundamental breakthrough innovation. The other geographies we operate in are, I would say, more business model innovation, because if I'm a company in India, I don't really have to go outside of India to sell my market. There's a billion people there. The domestic market is very big, and the same with China. But in the areas where Israel operates or Europe, we see fundamental technologies that develop. In terms of cross-border transactions, I think on the investment side, we haven't really had too many problems. A lot of times, the CEOs from the Israeli company, either pre-investment or even post-investment, will move to the West Coast, and that sort of become fairly standard way of operating. And then there's a dual board structure. There's board meetings in the West Coast, and there's board meetings in Israel, and that seems to have worked. There was one particular anecdote I heard just yesterday from a company that I've not heard in the past. But this is a company that sort of is in Sweden. So typically, a lot of the European companies also do the same thing, which is it's thought of in a small country in Europe, but they cannot scale, and then they move to New York or they move to the West Coast. Now, what this Swedish company told me was interesting and sort of applies to some of the data that's coming out from, I think, Cisco and a few others, which is they said, we already have a development team in the San Francisco, but we're not going to move there. And the reason we're not moving there is a lot of our acquirers, potential acquirers, want to use overseas cash. So we're actually better off staying where we are from a corporate board perspective instead of moving to the US when somebody's going to buy us and going to use overseas cash anyway. So again, I don't think that's a trend, but that was one of the first times I actually heard something like that. Maybe inform your thinking as you think of where you want to locate. Having said that, I would say we've had pretty good luck with companies we've invested in Israel and sort of being very successful in doing both investment and acquisition?
Okay. Briefly, 2 points. One, we've invested in 2 incubators in Israel. And we've had terrible luck with those outside of Israel. But one thing I think many, at least in healthcare, agree on is Israeli entrepreneurs do more with less. And so incubators in Palo Alto or Boston, the kind of the mindset, the gestalt is just different. You need to hire a high-priced CEO, and you get these expensive MIT engineers, and it's expensive, and it sort of defeats the whole purpose of the incubator concept. In Israel, we've had a lot of success there. The other side of that coin is we have done a number of deals there. We bought a heart valve company, for example, and it was a company called Mentor, and it was a great success for the entrepreneurs and the VCs. And then we use that as an innovation center to fund work in the mitral valve. And those guys got incredibly frustrated working in the Medtronic R&D organization, where you have all sorts of process and phases, and that's one thing I learned. And these guys are still friends of mine, but in my experience, the early stage innovation stuff they loved and were very good at. And I'm painting with a very broad brush, I know that. But in the big bureaucracy of the R&D organization, we've had trouble. And so that's one of our challenges vis-a-vis Israel when we think about M&A.
Great.
So our team does both direct and indirect investments. So direct in startups and indirect in funds. And when we basically started investing in clean tech, we said that there are places where we can cover physically, and there are places where we would like to know very much what's happening and we're not there physically. So we invested in a fund in the US, in a fund in Europe, and a fund in China, and actually Israel as well. And the reason we did that is we thought that Israel is such a hotbed actually when it comes to clean tech investments that we cannot afford to stay away. So we did that a couple of years ago. In terms of the direct investments, we invested in a company called RightSource. This is a solar thermal power generation company. And actually at the time when we invested in it, there were probably 7, 8 other candidates. My recommendation was actually to go with that one. And right now it is really the one that is standing, and most others have disappeared. What has worked is that this is a combination of talent from the US as well as talent in Israel. And we kept that structure. So we still have the R&D and engineering function in Israel, and while the business development and commercial team in the Bay Area. So I think that is a model, especially when you're talking about things that require a lot of cash. So RightSource has raised probably over 700 million so far. So we're talking about a lot of money, and the US is a place where you can get that kind of cash. And so it works. If your technology is one that is capital intensive, that is one model that can work.
Terrific. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I would like to thank our 3 panelists, Issam, Chad, and Nagraj, for their great insights. And if you have a terrific idea, or you think you might be able to have an angle with one of these gentlemen, feel free to pitch them later on today. Thanks very much.